And I think also understanding the connection between history and space is a way to push students to become their own historians in a way, and to really look at their own surroundings and communities. Also recognizing that Edenville is one of several historically Black towns and spaces. I think it's a gateway when starting with the first one to push students to learn about other places, some that may be within their own town or community if they're not from, this part of Central Florida, but maybe a different state. What other historical places are they not aware of? What other historical places can they engage with that used to exist or still exist today? And what does that mean, whether they've been erased or they've been ignored?
And that is part of the work of history, is figuring out, maybe a through line, maybe a narrative that you can put together, but then also being okay with sort of telling stories that sometimes don't fit so neatly together. Because one of the things I try to remember as I'm writing about the past is that people who lived any number of years ago had lives that were as complex, maybe differently complex, but as complex as the lives that we live today. And so it doesn't make sense to try and put all of these things together in a single clean narrative. So for me, memory, both seeing what's there and also what's not there, and then asking folks to talk about their connections to places, whether in this case, when I'm thinking about Rower and Jerome, whether it's talking with Japanese Americans who were incarcerated at these sites or their descendants, or talking with folks who moved into the areas after the camps had closed, or who were there during the war and remember sort of some of these things happening, is to try and piece together all of these different stories and all of the ways that these sites in particular have been significant to people. So for me, the power of memory is thinking about sometimes how things don't make sense, and that's okay. That's part of putting together these histories and these stories. And this is where I think, as a historian, as a community member, I really value art, and I really value the ways that history can be expressed, not just through, books, which are so wonderful, or articles and all these things, but that someone could, write a poem that's about their ancestors, their stories, or their experiences returning to some of these sites, learning about this history.
It can make a child think about, the things that they like to do on a daily basis or who they experience, and put into context their life and what they want for the future. Or maybe thinking about their parents, or looking at their own family and personal history or community history, and maybe how that's shaped them, depending on the child's age and their ability to really analyze this. So yeah, I think if we allow students to take on similar approaches as Zora Neale Hurston did, centering life, and centering the lived experience, we can open them up to thinking very critically about everyday practices and everyday things that influence them, and others around them.
There's something about being at the place that allows you to access the layers of history and the sort of quotidian, everyday stories that make up these larger histories of things like Japanese American incarceration, but that also reminds you that Japanese American incarceration cannot be separated from the post-war homesteaders or from earlier histories of removal of Native Americans. And so there's something about being at this place at Heart Mountain that lets you see these layers and access these layers and sit with also what's not there anymore. And I think that is one of the most powerful parts of being in a place of having this sort of landmark where you're looking back and you're looking forward while you're looking out, and you're seeing both, the traces of these histories and then also the moments of erasure, the things you can't see there anymore, that tell as much of a story and can remind us of the sort of complexities and the presentness of the history itself as well.
So I think learning about and teaching about Eatonville is, one, recognizing that history is an ongoing project. And when we look at historical towns, they are an ongoing project. And what does that mean for your students to learn the history of a space and know that space is still continuing on? And they may engage with a space like that too. And I think also understanding the connection between history and space is a way to push students to become their own historians in a way, and to really look at their own surroundings and communities.
What it means to live near this place, I think is really significant and lends a certain kind of meaning that also helps us understand the present. Because if we can think about the ways that our memories imbue certain places with meaning, then it helps us see, where we've gotten to, what these places mean to us today, and how we can use them to sort of better understand the past and solve some of these problems and tensions that come up in the present.
And so I really want to emphasize that, and how you, regardless of who you are, can use, any form of device you have to collect information, or to try to create a story, or not create, but help put together a story of various people from different generations, attempting to wrestle with their past, present, and the future of their town.